Joining us now to discuss, Stephanie Creary. She's an assistant professor of management at the University of Pennsylvania's Wharton School, and former Kentucky Attorney General Daniel Cameron, who's the CEO of the nonprofit organization, the 1792 Exchange. It's nice to see both of you today. There has been a lot of pushback, I don't have to tell either one of you, against DEI efforts, and there's been some pushback that this is actually not leading to people getting the jobs who deserve them. Stephanie, when you look at that, and especially what you see in your role at Wharton, does it actually lead to less productivity? Does it lead to issues in the workplace to have a more inclusive workforce?
Yeah, well, thank you for having me on. And let me start by saying that making any changes as large scale as this to DEI practices by getting rid of staffers and DEI leaders and DEI offices altogether, it doesn't just hurt Black people, women, or historically marginalized groups, which is what most people believe. In fact, most people believe that DEI practices are firmly about who gets in the door. Most DEI practices, by and large, are about what happens to people once they are already in the door. So what are the implications then for those of us who have jobs? And so let me give you an example, because again, most people don't understand what DEI practices are and aren't focused on what is exactly happening when we are getting rid of them. So most of us are evaluated on a regular basis for our performance, and our direct supervisors or managers are the people who determine what our performance ratings are. But research and my work with companies shows two things. First, managers often rely on their gut instinct and not universally agreed upon criteria in order to assess performance. And second, no two managers often assess people using the same criteria. DEI practices were holding managers and organizations accountable for, one, using the same criteria, and two, creating calibrations processes so that managers are using the same scales in the same way to evaluate performance. So that's an example of when we get rid of DEI leaders, staffers, employees, and offices, we get rid of the accountability mechanisms that are ensuring fairness for all of us.
Daniel, do you think Trump made the right decision?
Boris, thank you guys for having me on. I wholeheartedly believe that he made the right decision. In many ways, the federal government now becomes the gold standard, if you will, for hiring practices, moving away from diversity, equity, and inclusion to merit, excellence, and intelligence or integrity. And the fact of the matter is that you can hold people accountable and be good employers without basing it on quotas. For instance, in my work at 1792, we promote and encourage people to utilize key performance indicators. That has nothing to do with your race or what you look like. It has everything to do with your merit and ability to get a job done. And I'm excited to see this in the federal government. Look, if we take a step back, what this in large part is about is making the federal government leaner. President Trump came in talking about he wanted to make us safer, secure, and more prosperous. Having a diversity, equity, and inclusion department doesn't secure our southern border. It doesn't make us safer. So this is in many ways a reflection of an administration and a president who campaigned on the idea that he wanted to move us to merit, excellence, and intelligence, wanted to make us safer, secure, and more prosperous. And on now, in the first couple of days, he is making that commitment clear, and I'm excited to see it.
So we obviously have two very differing views on DEI. Stephanie, I wonder how you respond to Daniel's view of things.
Yeah, well, I've spent the past 20 years actually studying what companies do across various sectors in different industries. And hiring practices is one small piece of what constitutes DEI practices. In fact, it's the one that is getting mentioned most often by people who are a bit confused about what it is that organizations are trying to do. By and large, most of what falls under the auspices of DEI practices in organizations is about the environment for people who work in an organization. It's about fairness in promotion, evaluation, compensation practices. It's about an environment that rewards people fairly based on their merit and based on the work that they put in. Only focusing on what happens at the hiring level, focusing arbitrarily on quotas that often don't exist in many organizations, is taking the attention off of what the implications are for you and I and for other people who are fully employed in these organizations whose DEI practices are at risk.
Daniel, is there some misunderstanding of what DEI actually encompasses?
Well, look, I appreciate Professor Creary being on with her today. The fact of the matter is that we have seen now over 10 companies and some iconic brands, if you will, make a decision to wind down their DEI practices, whether it's Walmart or McDonald's. And look, some of this is changing because the legal landscape has changed. There was a case in front of the Supreme Court last year, the fair admissions case, in which they struck down race-conscious decisions in admissions related to students. A lot of people, myself included, argue that potentially could be applied to the private sector. In fact, McDonald's, when they made a judgment to wind down their DEI practices, mentioned that case. Again, this does not have anything to do. We all agree at the end of the day that we need to have a colorblind society. And I think employers recognize that they can do that without ultimately making a judgment that it has to largely come down to quotas or looking at someone's skin color. Again, merit, excellence, and intelligence is the way to go. The Trump administration has made that clear. And I think a lot of organizations and corporations are making that judgment as well, seeing that a lot of them are making the decision to move away from DEI.
This is one of those conversations I wish we had an hour for. Daniel Cameron, Stephanie Kruger, unfortunately we have to leave it there, but we look forward to having you both on for further discussion in the future. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you so much.